Welcome to the Rise to Thrive podcast. Rise to Thrive is your real talk resource to elevate your life and business through growth, wellness, and manifestation. With your co-host, Linda Tate, financial advisor turned life and wealth strategist, founder of Leela Life, and self-named Nordic Shaman, and Amelia Travis, yoga teacher turned multi-six-figure business coach, founder of Stoked Yogi, and spiritual warrior. We're here to help you level up and create the life you imagine, sharing inspiration and strategy to elevate vibes and consciousness so you can rise to your best self and thrive as your best self. Tune in weekly to Thrive Daily. Tuning in now. Good day, Rise to Thrivers. Thanks for joining us. And I have a very exciting interview for you today with Alyson Charles, also known as the Rockstar Shaman. This is your host today, Linda Tate, and I am beyond excited to share whatever is about to come through with you. So keep an open heart and mind and enjoy today's show, and welcome, Alyson.
Oh, here we go. Yeah, right as you were saying, I'm just, whatever is going to come through today. I was literally like energies are channeling into my crown chakra. So we're officially going.
Yay, buzzing. So Alyson, I mentioned to you a little bit briefly before, but I am a fangirl of your work, and partially because of my own like shaman curiosities. Some, if you pay attention to our intro, may know me as the self-acclaimed Nordic Shaman. And, I want to just talk to you about how you came into your work as a shaman, what that journey's been like, and if you could share that with the listeners who are meeting you for the very first time.
Yes. Well, hello to everyone that's listening, and thank you for your kind words. And yeah, it sounds like we have a lot of similarities on our path. And I mean, in the big picture, the grand universal picture of things, I have done this work for so many different lifetimes, whether, it was a sage or a mystic or shaman, whatever these words we want to put on it. But I've definitely walked this path many a times across, various continents. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about traveling, right? Or working with indigenous leaders or master shamans from different countries. It's like all of a sudden it can unlock these past live shamans, that you were, and that was something that happened to me similarly. I'm sure we'll get into it when I was recently at a really powerful indigenous gathering with the Maori people. It was with a bunch of different cultures, but the Maoris unlocked something big for me. So, that's the big picture answer is I've come to this work because I've done it so many lifetimes, and it was the life mission and soul contract that I signed on for before I incarnated. But on a more grounded earthly explanation, I always had these gifts, and to some degree, I was aware of them. Even as a young girl, I was just always innately drawn to metaphysics and the healing power of colors and palmistry and numerology. And on my own accord, those were really the only books I ever read. But there were just some childhood things that I was coming up against that made me kind of have to decide between being totally awake and keeping these shamanic spiritual gifts alive and growing and thriving, or kind of putting a cork on them in order to preserve my coaching / father-daughter relationship that I had with my dad. So I have a very deep athletic background, and before I was even 3, my dad put me in my first running road race. And so
Wow.
yeah, at a very, very young age, this high level athletics life began. And, I of course would not change a thing of it. And I have a great relationship with my dad and love him very much, but it was very intense. I was a child star athlete, 2-time national champion, and a lot of pressure. I mean, starting that young and, traveling around the entire country and just feeling like, without you even knowing it, you start to have these things built inside of you of like, you're only worth something if you win all the time, right? And these certain identities and these things that get put upon you that can start to cause, a lot of pain and dysfunction. So I ended up running on scholarship at the University of Alabama. and I had a wonderful time there. And it was around the end of my college running career. My body was breaking down because I'd been running a distance, been a distance runner for so many years at that point. And that was when I started, as I was feeling my physical body breaking down, that's when I started to question things, right? Because that identity of Alyson, the runner, or back then I was more known as Ally. So Ally, the runner girl, the star athlete, that identity was starting to crumble as my body was starting to crumble. And so for the first time, those bubblings up, those more enlightened questions started to come around of like, well, wait, if this is going away, who am I really? And, so whittling this story down quite a bit, because it's been a very, very long journey for me, I started to question if sports and athletics were really what I wanted, or if that was just something I was told to do. And I didn't want to rebel against it if it was supposed to be my path, right? Because I definitely, one of my main archetypes is the rebel, so I have to really watch that. So I did become a Division I college coach after college, and I did become an advanced certified personal trainer after college, just to like make sure. And it was when I was the head trainer at a gym in Orlando, Florida, that universe like divinely intervened, and a client came in and he said, you should be my radio show co-host. And that was the first time I got plucked out of the athletics world and more into the entertainment industry. And there I started to feel more on my path. And this was an aspect of life that I always knew would be a part of my journey. I studied telecommunications and film in college, and but I just thought maybe I'd be the next, a next sports broadcaster or something like that. But there I was in the radio studio, and then I became a #1 rated hip hop radio show host for a morning show. So then, I was really enjoying things. That was a super fun job. Switched over to television, became a talk show host. And it was around this time when, the big stuff really started to happen, because threaded throughout everything that I've told you, I had been in a very long relationship. I ended up being in a 16-year relationship with my ex-fiance. Yeah, we were both athletes at Alabama. And so I met him my first date on there very young. And yeah, it was a really deep karmic journey. And so as this karmic journey with he and I was happening, there was a ton of suffering. We were both in denial, a lot of issues. It was very toxic in a lot of different ways, some pretty scary ways at times. And, as this suffering level was increasing, I just became more lost and swept in it. And just, it was almost like this cyclone, this foggy cyclone where I didn't understand what was going on, and I didn't know up from down, and I didn't really know right from wrong, and I didn't know how to get out, or if I wanted to get out, because there was codependency. And it just was a really scary time. And we called the engagement off, and I moved to New York City on my own. And about 7 months later, he came back around with some different things, different thoughts. And I didn't jump back into things, but I thought, he's saying stuff that I've never heard him say before. Maybe things are going to be different this time, that typical, cycle of insanity kind of living. And it was then that I had my massive, the day that changed everything. So he had come to my place in Brooklyn, and we were going to venture out publicly as doing this again as a couple. And that's when literally all my ascended masters and guides just blew the whistle, and God was just like, we've got to intervene at this point, you guys. This whole cycle is going to start again unless we intervene. So as I was going to go tell him that we could leave in 5 minutes, and he was asleep on my couch, and I didn't want to wake him up. So as I was walking back through my bedroom, they turned on my clairaudient gift. And so I heard God's source speak to me in my right ear and told me to stop and turn around. And when I did, I saw his phone on my bookcase, and he never went anywhere without it. So I could already feel this huge energy system happening, and that energy system walked over to the phone with me. And I heard another message in my right ear telling me to brace myself. that what I was about to see was going to rock my world. And I punched in 4 numbers to his phone, which I never knew his code. The phone opened, and this was like the shamanic moment for me. It was like that phone was truly that shamanic cave, that cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek kind of moment. Because this lifetime, the evidence and the things that I was finding in the phone, it was making me face my greatest, deepest fears of betrayal. And it was all just so horrific that moment of entering into the phone, and finally, after almost 2 decades of being blinded and having a veil over my third eye and being in denial and being in this pain cycle of codependency, like all of that, along with my egoic shell, got blasted off. Like everything that I had clung so tightly to for almost 20 years got completely obliterated within a few seconds of looking into his phone. And along with that, the veil over my third eye just like pinged up, like when you yank a curtain up. And it was, my story is one of those, like in one split second, everything changed.
Wow.
And yeah, energetically it woke him up. And I'll wrap this part of the story up with just, obviously, like I asked him to leave, and we have since, that chapter was done at that point. Like that karmic journey was complete. And I flew to Indiana, where I'm originally from. I mean, I was shell shocked, and my life had completely changed. And over the next few days, more of my spiritual gifts awakened, and I had my surrender moment. And I just wanted to become devoted to my healing. So the very long answer to how I became a shaman and a mystic, it took a divine intervention for me to get on this course. And then the next main step was surrendering and saying to Great Mother Earth and God and to myself, like, I don't know what I'm doing, show me the way. And then absolutely being consciously aware, once you make that statement, being consciously aware of the guidance and messages coming in. And I have heeded those calls and lived by those calls since that day. And that's why my life is completely different. I live on the pathway of divine guidance. And I didn't set out to become a shaman. It's completely a calling that happened once I had been on my healing journey for quite some time. My soul was at a place of readiness to return me to the remembrance of why I'm here and the purpose for why I incarnated. So from there, I've just been like walking this path every moment of every day.
The remembering of your lifetime.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's in there. We're filled with all this ancient wisdom and all this stuff inside of our chakras and our light body. And so that's the thing, when you devote to high vibrational practices and to healing work and to going inward and really facing yourself and facing your shadow and doing the shadow work and doing the things that can be wildly uncomfortable. But every single time you do that, it activates your light body more. It opens and unlocks your chakras more. And that is the integral key, the vital keys to reconnecting to your soul and reconnecting to why you're even here.
When you were going through that moment and you're getting the messaging about the cell phone and you're like, I'm being ripped open right now, like, were you aware of what was happening to you? How long did it take you to really process, like, on the more spiritual, like, this is your moment level of everything?
Yeah, I mean, I was aware as it was happening that this fucking horrific thing was happening, right? And like, I could feel the magnitude of it, but it was more the magnitude on the human level, right? Of like, oh, and I'm dying, because there, in many respects, that was one of my shamanic deaths, it was egoic death. And so I was feeling the pain. At that point. I could feel the monstrosity of it, and I could feel the human levels of pain of it, but I wasn't aware yet of the magnitude of the spiritual awakening side. It took me, when I was in Indiana, I think I flew out the next day. And then it was in those coming days where, the clairvoyance kicked in, and I started to understand a little bit more like, whoa, there's some really trippy stuff going on right now. But it was a bit more on my healing journey. Like the very first, once I surrendered, some of the very first people, or the very first people that universe sent me to were shamans. And so right away I was uniting with my core power animal, the Black Panther, and all these other things were occurring. But like these initial activations, it takes a little bit of time to assimilate within you and integrate within you and to get embodied. So it did take me a little bit of time to put the pieces together of like, whoa, what was activating that day are your spiritual gifts. You know what I mean?
And just the ripple effect of how it clicks into your life, and then how you're integrating into your life. It sounds like somewhat of a traditional upbringing. What was that experience like for you?
Yeah, I mean, when you say what was that experience like for me, do you mean me like having the spirituality in me opening up more?
Yeah, now you're back with maybe family or friends. I mean,
Mm,
different people in your life that you have been in relationship to, now
right.
super loaded with spiritual gifts that have awakened unlike you'd ever experienced before.
Right. Well, it's interesting because my best friend from growing up, and we are still best friends to this day. So I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but many years later, after my awakening, I came to understand that my main love and light guide this lifetime is Jesus.
Hmm.
And so I know Jesus as an ascended master and as my main love and light guide. I know Jesus as the guide who came to me on my shamanic journey and who I talk to every day and these things. But all these years ago, my best friend, as all this was occurring, she for many years has been a devout Christian. And so she knows Jesus from more of the biblical sense, and so it was just interesting again, and these hindsight things to look back, like, oh, as this stuff was occurring, I was on the phone with her a lot, and she was really steadfast in supporting me. And at that time, Jesus was being brought into the picture, but more from like, talking to Jesus through her guidance, more from the biblical place, and so it's just
Uh-huh.
this whole really wild ride. And I mean, my family, they've been really supportive of my work. It's quite, I don't want to say, well, I mean, I guess saying it's foreign to them would be an accurate statement. Like, I think unless you walk this path, and do this work, you can't fully expect someone to understand it. It's all of this work and this lifestyle is beyond human articulation, right? And so you can't really explain to someone like your norm or your daily occurrences that occur all day long. They're otherworldly. So they have been my biggest supporters, but they definitely have lots of questions along the way. It didn't surprise anyone though. I've always been different. I was, my dad took me to get acupuncture and to hypnotherapy and all these things when I was like 6, 7, 8 years old. It was for running purposes, but nonetheless, I was exposed to Eastern and metaphysical modalities and practices from a very young age. Even though I grew up in this tiny town in Indiana, these kinds of quote unquote different things were not foreign to me. So the fact that I, aligned with this calling, being a public figure, shaman, and mystic, I don't think it surprised anyone.
Well, and it's so interesting when you look back and feel like the journey of athletics, and I can relate to that feeling of the identity and so much of the suffering that just can even come embedded in that experience, to then lead you to so many of these truths in ways when you look back, it's just somewhat, I think, laughable. Like you just wouldn't even understand. You almost had to go through that to then have the contrast to really embrace everything that you came into.
For sure. I mean that, and exactly, I'm spot on. And that's why I said I wouldn't change a millisecond of any part of my path. I fully know that everything is an instrument for our awakening, and everything that's occurring to us is here serving us if we allow ourselves to work it in that way and to alchemize it in that way. I mean, it's been a huge journey, and don't think that overnight I forgave my ex-fiance, or like, I mean, I had to take time to take responsibility for my side of things and look at my part in it. I had to, like, I mean, there's so much to all of this. But yeah, the athletics part, it was really my first form of meditation, you know, and it was my first really deep spiritual practice, you know, connecting with nature. I was a distance runner, cross country runner, being with myself, being in that meditative state, united.
Earthing all the time.
Yeah, yeah. And it helped me get into my body, you know, and I know that was by divine design and by soul contract, because I'm so cosmic and so ethereal. So they're like, okay, we're going to like make her start being a distance runner, connecting to this planet like every day since before she's 3, and we're going to get her in her body.
How do you define mystic and shaman for our listeners that might not have a definition they land on?
I don't want to define it.
Trick question. Well, you mentioned, like, you know, even our language, right? Like the words we speak, they only go so far. You know, we're experiencing 5 senses, and there's maybe thousands of other things happening beyond that.
Yeah.
But if there's something that could resonate regarding
Sure.
language.
No, I only said that to you because you also do this work, and I knew you'd get mad if I said that. But like, yeah, it's always wild, right? Yeah, to put human words on a practice that where you work with other realms. So, you know, I think the beautiful thing and part of my mission is to just remind people that shamanism is a planetary practice. I think a lot of times, especially in the US, for some reason, I don't know if it's like certain movies or depictions that have been shown or whatever it is that led to people thinking that shamans are supposed to look only a one certain way, or that they're supposed to be men, or that they only are Native American or come from Peru. It's like none of those things, right? And it's, I mean, it is those things, but it's not just that. Shamanism is a planetary practice. There are Celtic shamans and, you know, Balinese. When I was in Bali, and I know you were recently there as well, I go there frequently, and they call their high priests, their shamans, their Balians. And, you know, there's shamans from all over the world and all cultures and all nationalities. You know, obviously Celtic shamans, they're going to be primarily, you know, Celtic and look Caucasian. And so that's one thing that I just want to start with, helping people reconnect to and to wrap their heads around, that shamans don't look necessarily a one certain way. And that's the beauty of it, right? Because I've been so fortunate and blessed to have immersed with and sat with and be led and taught by some of the most renowned indigenous spiritual elders and leaders and master shamans from all over the planet. And they all work the shamanism very differently. You know, some wear more traditional attire. Some work primarily with plant medicines. Other shamans view plant medicines as poisons and never work with plant medicines. So, you know, that's that aspect of it. But at the heart of it, we are all these uniters of earth and sky. We all work with earth, walk in a very alchemical, medicinal way. There's a sacredness and a reverence that we have for it all. And we do the work, we go within ourselves so that we can, you know, help unlock and help other people remember the power that's within all of us. And so my medicine gets delivered out through media and big mass transmissions, you know, through television shows and guiding massive shamanic events or shamanic offerings at huge events that Pop Sugar puts on, or the HBO Film Festival or whatever. And me being a walking medicine woman and being in this physical body can allow maybe a certain audience or demographic that wants to lean into this work to find it and to find me, because I'm in New York City and LA and I travel a lot, and so you see what I mean. And so that's why it's by all divine design that there are so many different kinds of shamans in all over the world, and we all look different because we're here as medicine people to help empower people and unite people, and we're not all like, not everyone's going to resonate with my form of shamanism, or not everyone's going to resonate with an Ashaninka's form of shamanism, so it's all of those things. That was a very long answer.
No, it's the perfect answer. And I think like what you're saying about having access to people and really meeting them where they are, when this would be something that immediately has some kind of stigma or fear-based. I mean, the dictionary definition says right away, I believe like evil spirits, has access to evil spirits, and there can be almost sometimes like this witchy or like sometimes demonic, like coming from a like very rich Christian background myself. It's like not rich in money, just like
Right.
filled with religion, rich with religion. It was almost like a scary word for me. And I'm sure that there are others that when they hear that, they could feel that way. And when you're talking about, this connection to nature, to earth, to spirit, and that's what it is, it's all of a sudden like, oh, I want all those things. I want that.
Yeah. And I have only ever worked with, the love and light guides. And I mean, the shadow work is an absolutely vital piece. You cannot come into your full power and be a fully integrated, fully embodied healer, mystic, shaman, unless you have gone within and done shadow work. So, there's that aspect of the quote unquote like darkness, but it's not bad. It's not evil. These are the aspects inside of ourselves that every person has, that we might be ashamed of or embarrassed of or fearful of. But it's because we are ashamed or fearful that stops us from really looking at those aspects and pieces, and we turn the other way, which causes us to be cut off from a whole huge part of ourselves, which causes us to be disconnected from our full power and from knowing ourselves in full. You have to lean into those scarier aspects. And so the shamanism that I work with is just full embodied beauty and flourishing divine power, and it's about alchemizing. So when quote unquote bad, hard things or challenging things or hardships come your way, it's about sniffing into them and looking into them, like, what is this teaching me? Why is this happening to me? Self-inquiry, why is this a part of my journey and my path? And like, then it is you might get this blast of this like horrible or hard thing that's occurring to you, and it might feel like evil or bad, but it's not. It's there to serve you and teach you. And that's where the alchemy piece comes in. And that's where the shamanic piece comes in, is doing those things that I just talked about, the self-inquiry and asking, what is this teaching me? What is the lesson here? And when you lean into the scary things and look at them and smell them and taste them and feel them, then that's where the alchemy happens. And the scarier aspects start to disintegrate and dissolve. You start to have more light bulb moments as to why this is happening to me, and you start to rise up back into the higher vibrational energetic river, which is where you ultimately want to be functioning. So rather than it taking you down, you allow it to alchemize and you get lifted up from it.
That's the best way I've ever heard like the river put into place, because so often you hear of like the flowing and go with the flow and flow with the river and, be in that flow. And it's like, yes. And there are going to be these moments like the experience that you went through that completely chop you off at the knees and break you down in ways you never thought possible, and allow you to flow even more free and even, at that higher vibration. But it's not like today I'm deciding to flow down the river and be at the flow of life and I will never have these dark experiences again. That's not what's happening.
No, that's not at all. And that's not why we're here. We incarnate to have this earthly experience, to be connected to all these senses and to experience the 3D and to have things here that we don't have when we're swirling in the ethers. And so we come down to feel the full spectrum. So spirituality and consciousness and shamanism is not about just like only keeping yourself turned towards like only one mindset or acting like everything is great. It has none of that. It is including everything, looking at everything, facing everything, having a conscious awareness of everything, and allowing it all to serve you, uplift you, teach you, inform you, open you up, open your heart up more, so that there's more compassion you can share with the world, more empathy you can share with the world. Because one of my favorite quotes is, once you know yourself, you know the world. Because like after you have a spiritual awakening and you see the truth about yourself, you're like, you can never judge another person ever again. Trust me. If you've had a spiritual awakening, it's like, I mean, there still might be the egoic part that wants to judge, but you really can't, because you're just like, I can't judge anyone because I've seen the truth about myself.
You realize where it's all really coming from, beyond that.
Yeah.
You're reminding me, this was years ago, and it's sort of an irony to it, but I was traveling. It was my first family trip to Finland with my parents and my brother, and that's where like the idea of Nordic Shaman comes from. And on this trip had my own big awakenings, and I bought at one point, not even thinking of it, this very odd tile, and it had said on it, "Be kind to your shadow." And it was so not the aesthetic I would ever buy. And I'm like, I need to have this. And I bought it, and it's in my bathroom right now. And it's on top of the toilet. I have the full chills. And it's like, ever since that moment, understanding the shadow work of not the scary, not the fear-based, it feels like it in the moment, but it's the processing, it is the integration, it's the being able to look at the darkest, hardest moments and understand what's my responsibility, even if it's like the weirdest part of your responsibility. What can you learn and how can you go from there? And I'm reminded of that daily, like I said.
Yeah, those are the true miraculous moments. It's leaning in, it's having unconditional love. It's for your entire self, and it's not unconditional love without doing the work. It includes doing the work too, but it's like you have to really see it all. I mean, this isn't a very long story, but after my awakening, and I really let myself see the truth of the relationship, there were on my ex's part, there were some addiction issues, like sex addiction stuff. And that was a scary, shadowy monster for me. It was so freaking terrifying. It was so scary for me to look at. It felt freaky. It felt creepy. It made my stomach turn. It made my body freak out. It evoked so many things inside of me when I first had that realization and understanding of that being one of the pieces at play. When I would take a peek at it, I'd be like, it would freak me out. And then but I kept knowing I needed to do the work with it, and I needed to face that. And there were so many other things I needed to face too, my stuff with myself included. But for some reason, that piece, I'm just using that as a shadow example of how they can feel so scary to look at. But now, I mean, look, now I'm, able to discuss it and talk about it. And it's through the leaning in and the understanding of where these shadow behaviors and things come from, that the compassion and non-judgment and unconditional love pieces and forgiveness pieces can come in.
And you being able to say, like, I am whole, like in the most broken moment, finding your wholeness, right?
Yes. Yeah. I do the work. Like I know who I am, and I can say that with integrity and authenticity and conviction. And it's because I have fucking done the work.
It's really hard.
Yeah. And it's like, I mean, for so long too, because like you said, it's really hard, and it's so deep and can be so scary. There was many years along my journey where I definitely maybe at times took it too seriously, or I got in a zone where I was less goofy than in my nature than what I used to be. And, because it's deep, and it's true, oftentimes very intense work. And it took me so many years of doing the work to finally get to this other side where, like, I'm able to see the humor in it more and laugh about it more, and there's a greater lightness to it. But this is all a part of the entire path. It's called the hero's journey for a reason,
Right. And you being able to be in that true essence of you, you know, on the other side of so much work and growth, it's like you might feel like that child Allie that was playful in this spirit and you lost along the way in a way. And then it's like, oh, here I am in like that goofy, fun, amazing, like that's the light of you that is shining so bright every day.
Yeah, exactly. And again, not getting too much into it, but it's about looking at the various archetypes that we have. There's so many different archetypes. And I mentioned the rebel being one of them. And, it's shit. I was going in a direction here. Hang on. Let me see if it comes back in because that felt really important. Hang on.
Okay.
For some reason it went into the ethers. That's weird. I wasn't meant to say it. Okay, never mind.
Well, what I do want to ask you is a few questions. One is, we're in 2019, you know, the shamanic work, bringing in earth and sky. We have a planetary, somewhat of a crisis or full-blown crisis, or you can be like the ignorance of it. You know, are there words of hope or words of affirmation or words of action that you feel that are important? I was watching the Democratic, oh my goodness, you know what I'm talking, the debate, the D word, the debates last night. And I'm like, oh, we're talking about climate change. Okay, great. And I'm like, we're talking about climate crisis. What are we really talking about?
Right.
And it's like a question that the answer for me is like the internal healing work that then leads to like the light in all of us to be here in like this symbiosis in a way that we maybe never have been before. And I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, 100%. It's again, there's so many things accessing in as you're asking this question, but we are here during a great planetary awakening and rise in consciousness. That's why so many prophecies are coming to light right now, like the Rainbow Warrior prophecy and the Eagle and Condor prophecy. Like I literally was witness to the Rainbow Warrior prophecy manifesting and coming to life here on Earth just a couple of weeks ago. It was perhaps the most incredible moment of my life. And so because we're here, and it's such a miracle that we are all incarnated here while this great, massive Gaia, Pachamama, Great Mother Earth shift is occurring, in order for this shift to happen and for this transformation to happen, Earth, Great Mother Earth, she is no different than us. We are all one. She is this living, breathing, massive being that provides everything to us. So she is a living, breathing being. And just like we've been talking about going within and the shadow reveal and letting the pain body surface and letting the suffering be understood and all of these things, the same goes for planet. And for so many years, like whether it's the racism or Holocaust or whatever, all these horrific, traumatizing things that have happened on planet Earth, they've just been, suppressed and stuffed down. And so what we're going through and have been going through for the last few years is the pain body of Earth and the suffrage of Earth and the shadow reveal of Earth, like these things coming to light and coming to surface and coming up for breath. And it's an absolutely needed and vital part in order for us as a humanity and in order for Earth to transition back to a place that is the planetary truth, that is oneness. And, the fact that all this separation and division, like it's just, it's hard for me to wrap my head around someone that does soul level work and, knows the truth that we are all one, to see, I can't even wrap my head around like how we could view someone as less than or different just, because of color. But all these things are happening to get us to a more healed, whole side. And so the last thing that I'll say is, like, because we all come down here with different purposes and with different energetic medicines and different ways in which we are to be of service to the world and of service for this shift, that's where you need to really look at what's coming up. And sometimes that means having really difficult, hard conversations. You know, myself included, I've definitely had some really crunchy, uncomfortable conversations around this, but it's like leaning into what's coming up. We can no longer turn a blind eye to these things. And of course, ultimately you would want it to happen in a place that is open-hearted and where you feel safe, that these conversations and tough topics can come up to be discussed. But once you let yourself look and be very consciously aware of what is surfacing and why, you then have to, you know, go into meditation or self-inquiry and ask, you know, how can I best be of service for this? You know, I get asked that question a lot, like, how can I change the world? And I'm like, you know, go within first. Like, have you ever done shadow work for yourself? Like, how do you expect to be a change maker for the planet and a change maker assisting Great Mother Earth and her shadow reveal if you have not faced your own shadow reveal?
Being willing to go within and maybe quieting some of the noise until you're willing to do that work first.
Yeah. So there's a lot of different phases to this, a lot of different like aspects to this. You know, some people feel really called to be on the front line of marches, and some people feel really called to, you know, lead protests. And, you know, one of my dear friends is the president of Black Lives Matter, and he is on the front lines like every day. So I'm just using these different examples. For me, it's about sharing shamanic journeys and helping people remember the spiritual truths that live inside of themselves and helping them unlock and open that up. There's just different ways in which we can all beam the consciousness energies out and the high vibrations out. One is not better than the other. It's just really asking yourself, like, what is my role here? What is my earth mission here? And how can I be of service in this planetary change?
Yeah, and I think hopefully our listeners are feeling inspired, if they haven't asked that question today, to ask themselves that. And it's like you're tapping into getting people to ask that question every day, which,
Yes.
and they're asking that question, and then they're helping people ask that question. It's really the ultimate ripple effect. I wanted to ask you about archetypes, and if anybody has curiosities around finding and using that as a tool of self-inquiry, any resources you recommend for that work?
Yeah, Carolyn Miss is a really renowned practitioner when it comes to that. And I dove into that work many, many years ago. I worked with a practitioner of Carolyn Miss. So that would be what I would recommend, is working with her, looking into her books and teachings, or working with one of her practitioners. It was for real one of the big game changers for me. I was in that session with this woman for hours. When we got done, she was like, I knew you were, she was like, this is the longest archetypes workshop I've ever done. Because I was resisting, I was resisting on an unconscious level, was it the saboteur? Was it the saboteur? No, the rescuer. I was resisting. I did not want the rescuer, because I won't tell the whole process, but when you work in this way with finding your archetypes, it's this whole procedure you do. And I just kept fighting the rescuer being included as one of my main archetypes. I didn't want to look at that aspect of myself. I didn't want to see myself as a rescuer, but let me tell you, once I, again, let myself look at that scarier aspect, or one that I felt more embarrassed of, or whatever, once I really let myself look at that, game changer, because you then see which archetype falls into which house on the wheel. Okay. And then I'm able to consciously be aware and consciously watch when I'm trying to rescue someone. And once I let myself see, be illuminated with that is an archetype that I have in myself, that completely helped me be in my power and other people be in power when people come to me for healing sessions or healing work, or come to my shamanic events, like, because you want to empower someone to be their own healer. You never want to rescue someone. So I had to, then I would watch that aspect and keep it in check, you know? So I definitely recommend people looking into, because these archetypes they can operate unconsciously and subconsciously too. So once we become aware consciously of them, it's just, you navigate your entire life and understand yourself completely different.
Like, oh, this is when I'm doing that. And if I'm being of service, they need to get through that.
Yes, yes.
Okay, we have to talk about your Rainbow Warrior prophecy and your experience a few weeks ago. I believe, right? It was a few weeks ago in the Indigenous community. Could you tell more about your experience? On the edge of my seat.
Yes, yes. Let's see. Oh my gosh, where to even begin? And this is the first time I'm talking about it, so I don't even know what's going to want to come through. Okay, so I united with my soul, these particular people who are in my soul family quite a while ago. It was during shamanic ceremony. That's a whole other, I wish I had time to tell that story because it's wild, but I don't have time to share it. But how I united with this particular couple, it's really trippy. But once I united with them in ceremony, I knew instantly. I was like, okay, I'm here for them. Like this is soul family. So we stayed in touch, and I learned of this gathering that they bring together, 40 of the most renowned Indigenous spiritual elders, wisdom keepers, teachers from all over the world. And they have this gathering called Aniwa, Aniwa. And so I knew completely, I'm like, I have to be there. And so I went and was immersed in a part of this 5-day gathering up in the middle of nowhere in like the woods on over 400 acres. And to be immersed in this portal 24/7, and you're walking around, eating with, being in ceremony with, sitting in the teepee with, learning from these masters of these indigenous traditions. It is just the most powerful thing you can experience, because so many of us are such old souls at this point. Like what I was referencing early with the Maori people, on the very first morning, I was planning to go to this one particular session. And then when I got there, it had already started, and I was like, it was this whole wild thing where universe was course correcting me, and it like pushed me over into this open field. Everybody was holding these giant like bamboo sticks, bamboo poles, and this Maori elder, face tattooed, much older man was guiding this particular session. And I got pulled energetically over there. And I was like, wow, I knew I was supposed to be there. And then this other Maori couple who were also there to facilitate different sessions, they were taking part in this workshop with me. And when they started to speak in their native tongue to the elder leading this, I unlocked something so ancient inside of me. The second he started to speak in his ancient tongue, I was just wailing and bawling.
Wow.
And so I went up to them afterwards and was just like, I know you. And they thought he was like, are you Maori? And I'm like, I'm still putting together my background, my roots. I don't think so. I don't know. And so we had this whole conversation. I walked away, and then the wife came up to me like a minute later, and she was like, he never loses feathers from his feather cape. And this feather, right after you talked to us and walked away, it fell off, and it's for you. And so like I got, and it's just like, as a shaman, like these are the most profound moments, right? When an indigenous elder comes over and hands you a feather from, the master shaman's cape, like these are the initial
big deal moments.
Yeah. And so someone else will be like, oh, cool, you got a feather. It's like, no, this is a big deal. And so, I get the feather, and later, again, just trying to whittle some of these big, massive stories down. Like I sat in many sessions with these people. Another profound moment, like we had to act like we were arriving to the land of New Zealand for the first time. And so there were greeters, and then there were like settlers. And I, even though I was connecting and knew I've been a Maori in past lives, and part of my ego wanted to be one of the greeters, I knew that I was supposed to be on the other side, and I was supposed to transmute some of that old settler energy, you know? And so I approached the people, and I was just bawling because I was able to kind of not redo history, but set a new energetic standpoint for what it should be in a high vibrational way when a settler reaches new land. You know what I'm saying? And so I'm saying to the people of the land, like, I'm bowing to them in respect and honor and peace. And I'm in reverence and awe for who they are and all that they can teach me and share with me. And just reiterating that we come in peace, and we're so blessed to be there and to learn from them. And please teach us your ways, share with us your ways so that we can learn. And do you see what I'm saying? I don't even remember. I was channeling that day, so I don't even remember what I was saying, but like that happened. And then the last example I'll share is, you know, we were in ceremony in the very last night, very powerful, out around the fire, underneath the stars. You know, it's me. It was a smaller group, very special sacred group of me with the elders and a few other people. And you know, the one Maori elder with the tattoos, he, during the ceremony, he just in visions kept coming to me face to face, face to face. And in the morning, I told him, you know, and he had visions that we've known each other for many, many lifetimes. And he had seen me during the night. We would do different dances and honoring things around the fire. And my body and hands were moving in a very certain way. I'm doing it now, obviously. I know you can't see it, but my hand was like shaking and moving, and I was working with the energy of the fire during the ceremony. And he said, you know, that thing that you were doing with your hand, that's us. That's our people. That's the Maori way. And he's like, you have Maori in your blood. And so he invited me to come to New Zealand, and he's going to take me to the sacred sites that have changed his life over there. And I mean, it's just one example. I got to spend time in the teepee with Native American oracles, and, you know, another tribe that I resonate with very, very deeply and feel very called to work with more and more is the Ashaninka tribe. I've interviewed the chief of that tribe, Benki Pianco. He's a UN award winner, environmentalist. And it's just incredible. Like, these are some of the highest level, like these. So a lot of these people come from unbroken lineages of master shamans, like down in, like for the Ashaninka tribe, they call them Pahes, like Paje, but they come from, like, their family, it's unbroken with these traditions. So it's basically, we were the living embodiment of the Rainbow Warrior prophecy, where there will come a day where, you know, people of all races, creeds, colors will unite to return this planet back to truth, back to oneness, unity, peace, emanate this light and love back. And it will no longer be the separation of like this culture versus that culture. It's all of us coming together for this cause, for Gaia and for humanity. And we were that. And one of the closing ceremonies for the entire gathering, one of the Native American oracles, well, there were two North Native American practitioners, and then Benki, who is representative of the South, because in the eagle condor prophecy, it's, you know, the eagle is the bird of the North and the condor is the South. And so when those two birds unite, it's the bridging of those two worlds too. So in this closing ceremony, it was such an incredibly powerful moment. I was just bawling when the Native American woman with an eagle feather in her hand walked to Benki and you know, presented, and he had condor feather, and so there was this whole exchange of the feathers, and as they were calling in the four directions, like it was very present, and it was very known that we were being witness to a monumental historical moment for this planet, with the energy that was happening there and the exchange of the feathers, and the fact that all these indigenous people that were all gathered in these ceremonial ways 24/7 for almost a week. It was the most miraculous time of my life.
It's what reminding me of is like the feeling I had, and right now in this moment, feeling so full of like hope and excitement and understanding, and just looking forward with this anticipation in a way that sometimes it can be easy to get caught up with, you know, the negativity and like the fear. And what I'm reminded of is, you know, what they're saying, right? 12 years till there's irreversible damage. And I feel like we are living in the most exciting time, this sweet spot of where this can't work anymore. The way we've been doing things can't work anymore in the most exciting way. And knowing that this like collective intelligence finding different ways and alleviate so much suffering, where, yeah, maybe we don't know what that looks like yet, but be excited because it's happening. And it's like A plus B doesn't equal C anymore. The practices that we are privy to and seeing in our like modern day society and around the world, it's like, this is gonna be a shit show if things don't change. And the feeling of things don't change, it's like things are changing, and filled with so much hope of that.
Yeah, yeah. And we just got to stay proactive, right? You know, we have to really stay devoted, like those of us that are feeling, you know, that maybe there's newer people feeling the call to lean into this work, and those that have, of us that have been devoted to this path for a long time, we just have to stay diligent and stay shining bright and stay doing the work, and just, you know, keep every day doing the missions and bringing people together, because it is a really, really exciting time, but it's going to take us all to come together to make this big shift happen in the way that it should.
Yeah, I'm like, the numbers just don't add up. You have over 1 billion people in China and India, and, you know, a planet of over 7 billion people. You know, things have to look different for this to work. And I say that with the most love and hope.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Alyson, thank you. This has been amazing. And I would love if you have any, number one, offerings that you want to share, and number two, any book club books to share those with our listeners.
Sure. Yeah, I have a really fun offering. I don't do these kinds of offerings regularly at all, but got the download a week or so ago to do it. It's called Summer of Spirit School. So it's going to start really soon. It's going to start in July, and twice a month for 3 months. I'm going to meet with everybody live online. And then when we're not meeting live online, I'm going to be delivering all sorts of divinely guided practices, shamanic journeys to meet your spirit animal. I'll be channeling personalized guidance and messages that are coming, in through me to be delivered to you. It's just going to be 3 months of total mystical, spiritual, blessed, energetic transmissions, and it's just going to be a beautiful journey to help people step into their power more, reconnect to their peace more. Basically, like everything that we've talked about in this interview, it's an aspect of Summer of Spirit School. So you can do it from anywhere in the world. The main thing that you have to do, if this speaks to you at all, is just send an email. That email is info@AlysonCharles.tv. It's ALYSON. So info@AlysonCharles.tv as in television. And so send an email there, and we will get you all the information. I'll offer a discount to your listeners. For anyone that joins through listening to this podcast, just let me know that you heard it through here. And yeah, it's going to be 3 months of powerful fun.
Awesome. So for our listeners that are wanting to do this work and not sure how to begin, or have some spiritual pulls or calls, or even this podcast activating that, please go to our show notes and check out, and we'll get that email to you, or you can message us on Instagram and follow Alyson on Instagram. Her stories are super fun to follow. And if you have a book, Alyson.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many amazing books. So many of my friends write these awesome books, like Sahara Rose is best-selling Ayurvedic author, Liana,
Yes.
Cancer-Free with Food. But this other one is just so monumental. It's called The Courage to be Disliked. I just think that that one's so helpful for so many people. I myself had to really get over the people pleasing mentality. It was such a journey for me, and that book was really helpful. So the courage to be disliked.
Thank you so much. I have to, as we wrap, share this quick story. So I'm connected with Alyson through social media, and around the same moment, I see her Forbes article that says, you know, her top books to, you know, experience. I'm not sure the name of the article. It was like this: your spiritual books to increase your spiritual life from Forbes. And I'm reading through, skimming, and I see Alyson, and I see all these Paul Selig books, the Book of Love and Creation, and other books of his that I had in my Amazon cart. And I'm like, oh my gosh, my Amazon cart. This is my you know, my yes, I'm going to go and buy them. So I buy all 3 in the first trilogy. And these are the books that send me into my trip to Bali. I kid you not. I'm reading. So I get through the first one, the I Am Word, and now I'm reading the Book of Love while I'm on the trip. And I get about halfway through and I'm sitting on the beach. My fiance is wrapping up his surfing session. I'm having this just like beautiful moment, and I'm doing a lot of the work in the book, and it was just at this moment so resonating. And this woman comes up to me and she says, can you watch my bag? And she's like, I've been looking at you on the beach for like the past 20 minutes. And I'm like, she can watch my bag. And I'm like, yeah, I can watch your bag. She wanted to go swim for a little bit. And of course we get to chit-chatting, and I kid you not, I said, well, you know, why are you in Bali? She said she's moving here full time. And she's like, well, I do retreats. Of course, I'm thinking yoga. And I said, well, what kind of retreats? And she says channeling. My jaw like drops, and I'm like, what? And I look to the back of the book, and it's like this book falls under channeling and metaphysics. And this is my first book ever reading on channeling. And I'm just so happy in this moment and like feeling it all, and receiving the you know, the blessing of the moment. And, you know, it's just when you follow those little pings, you never know what's unfolding. So
and that is the path. Like, thank you for ending and wrapping things up on that story, because that encompasses the journey, like
right.
listening to the whispers and letting the callings guide your life, and it's absolutely miraculous. And yeah, so I love that you ended up purchasing those books. Like, I love him, and I'm a channeler as well, so I'm glad that the channeling energy is being activated more.
It sure is. Well, thank you, listeners, and I send you all with many, many blessings, and enjoy this episode. Leave us a review, and until next time, these gems so you can thrive daily. Tune in weekly.
Thank you guys so much for hanging out with us today on another episode of Rise to Thrive podcast. We are so stoked that you're here. If you loved today's episode, if it helped you, please share it with a friend, snap a screenshot, tag us on stories at Rise to Thrive podcast, or head to iTunes or Spotify and leave us an honest review. We love you guys. We appreciate you. And until next time, keep rising, keep thriving. See you next time.